to have Anthony Vargas. What's up, Anthony?
What's up, man? Excited to be here. It's a privilege and honor to get to share some stuff with y'all today.
Absolutely. I was just talking to you off the recorded just a second ago, but for those who have listened to several of our episodes, you maybe have mentioned some of the guys that I have reached out to a few months ago. Anthony was one of those guys, and he was so gracious to give up about an hour of his time and just listen to all my silly questions, all the things that I was just working through. And so he was so helpful for me. And so I knew he was somebody I had to have on that y'all could learn from as well. So, Anthony, if somebody may not know who you are, will you tell them where you're serving and what God has you doing during this season?
Yeah, man. So I've been in youth ministry now a little over 12 years, and from Mississippi, the Dallas area, to now Oklahoma City, I serve as a student pastor at Together We Church. And man, I get the privilege and honor of just reaching those teenagers in this city. A lot of loss, but here's the cool reality is that a lot of people are moving to this area as well. So in my free time, I get to kind of do the same thing you're doing and equipping, coaching other youth pastors. I have my own podcast called Youth Pastor Tips, just
Yeah,
sharing
it's great.
practical stuff on how you can do youth ministry in your context. So excited about the conversation today, Blake.
Yeah, well, and your podcast is great. So if y'all haven't checked it out for whatever reason, if you somehow found this and not his, please go check out his. His has got a huge inventory of stuff. There's so many topics that you've covered that are just incredible. So please check it out
I'm still
as well.
figuring it out, man.
No, you're doing great. Well, the format of this podcast is super simple. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about you as a minister, how you think through ministry, and all those things so we can learn from you today. And the first question I wanted to ask you is, what does your sermon prep look like? I'm sure it's changed over the 12 years. The resources maybe, or the kind of maybe what you take to the pulpit has been changed slightly. So like, what does it look like for you from I'm sitting down planning out the sermon series all the way to what do you take to the pulpit with you?
No, that's good, man. Well, one of the best things I think we get to do as youth pastors is preach the Bible. I think that's just top priority outside of relationships. And man, I will tell you this from the early stages of youth ministry and plagiarism and Google, right. You had to figure
Yeah.
it out as a young minister. And I promise you, there's things I preach that are probably heresy, but I will say this, there is grace. All right. So I've learned over the years, man, what it takes to be a good shepherd of your craft. And there are some steps. I'm a guy, I have to have a routine and a process. So there's some things I put in place, even to my environment when it comes to sermon prep. Having a candle lit, having a lamp on with the lights off,
Yeah.
playing lo-fi beats. Those are things that I have to have going for me to get as creative as possible. So some of my steps, when it comes to just basically preparing a message, if you will, starting off with, here's a cool thing. I've done it so many times. Sometimes I just don't want any resistance. So I've even developed a sermon prep checklist. I can share more about that at the end, how you can get
Yeah.
access to that. But a sermon prep checklist that I know step 1, step 6, step 12. I don't have to ask or think anymore. I just know what's next. And so part of that process for me, obviously, we're starting step 1. We're picking a text. I try to be text driven in my messages.
Mhm.
I don't try to be topic driven. I let
Yeah.
the text bring out the topic. So I'm picking a text, and from there, I simply screenshot it on YouVersion app, and I put it in my iPad's. It's an app called Notability, and from
Okay.
there, I'm marking up the text as much as I can, reading it a couple of times in different translations. I'm sitting with a text for a day,
Yeah.
and I have a color code in which I underline promises in blue. Anything that talks about Jesus, I circle it in purple. Application, I think green for go, right? So I
Okay.
have this whole thing. After I break it down and try to exegete it, interpret it from that standpoint, I'll write out every truth I find from the passage. So
Okay.
if I'm dealing with 5 verses, I might write down 8 truths that passage tells me. And here's the
Yeah.
reality. I won't write anything down unless it's inspired by the text I'm reading. So
Okay.
I'll put the truth down and I'll put the verse inspired by that truth right after it. because I want to make sure when I get on stage to teach the Bible, the Word taught me before I teach
Yeah.
them.
That
Yeah,
makes
yeah. Yeah.
sense.
So I don't want to read into any passage. I want to pull out from the Scripture. See,
That's
that's the
good.
difference. I believe the danger between exegesis and eisegesis.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to put meaning into the text. We want to draw it out. I want to, at the end of the week on a Wednesday night, after preparing for a few days, I want to be on stage. I love the illustration. Like I've been in a gold mine and I come out and I say, look at the piece of gold that I
Yeah.
found, right? So after breaking down the text, writing out the truths, out of those 7, 8 different truths, I will pick one of those because you got to have one main point. I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer. It's one truth that drives your sermon. I'll pick one of those and then I'll begin the process of shaping an outline around that main truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before I shape the outline, I may pick up some commentaries, make sure I'm on the right track with the
Mm-hmm.
truths that I've written out and stuff like that. That's when I go to the commentary help. But I would encourage any young pastor, never go to commentaries until God has spoken to you.
Yeah.
So don't go to other authors that God's spoken to them. You let God speak to you first, and then you let the commentaries be your guardrails, if you will. So
Yeah. That makes sense.
when I get my main point, I'll shape my outline around it. Right, I want to do an introduction that provides some tension, a pain point, a problem that needs solving.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I'll transition it to an illustration, a story to get a hook in, and then I'll set up the passage with a little bit of context. We'll read the scripture, and then we'll teach on that main point and how the passage supports has some supportive truths to allow that main point to really sit in with the audience too, and through there, there's explanation, illustration, application. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you could choose any outline. I think my favorite that I use the most is Andy Stanley's "Me, We, God, You, We."
Yeah.
I just use it so much. You can use that hook, look, book, took. There's all kinds of outlines out there. Figure out
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
outline and go with it, man. And once I build the outline, then I'm a manuscript guy. So once
Okay.
I have the outline, I'll then manuscript my entire message. I'm looking at about probably 2,200 words.
Okay.
I'll manuscript. What's up, students? Good evening. I'll
Yeah.
down to the T. I need a manuscript. That's just who I am. That's how I'm
Yeah.
wired. And so that's basically my process when it comes to sermon prep. And when it comes to sermon series, that's a whole nother
Yeah. That's
question.
true.
Because I'm inviting the team in. We're figuring out the book of the Bible that we want to go through, and then we're splitting up the text
Mm-hmm.
into different weeks. And then once you do different weeks, so if James chapter 1, we'll split that up 3 times.
Yeah.
We know James chapter 1 now can be a sermon series in itself,
Yeah.
using those 3 different texts. And whatever the theme is of James chapter 1, it may be doing, right? Don't be
Mm-hmm.
hearers, but be doers. It may be, steadfast faith, the suffering and the trials and that produce whatever the theme is that we want to go with James chapter 1. We'll brand it. We'll split it up. We'll topic each one, and that's kind of how we do the sermon series, man.
Okay.
Invite the creative team in to create a graphic or something, and as a team, we'll just try to brain dump as much as we can through that
Mm-hmm.
process. That way, when the communicator on a Monday morning is looking at all the notes from that meeting, I remember we talked about that. Now
Mm-hmm.
let me figure it out. This is the passage. Let me break it down on my iPad, do all the
Yeah.
steps, right? And I got a good sense of direction, if you will. So yeah, that's kind of the whole process, man. Um,
So do you take the manuscript with you to the pulpit, or do you break that down into more notes or like bullet points?
so man, it just depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just depends. If I'm feeling comfortable with my congregation, man, I'll break it down into just an outline. But there's sometimes that I bring the entire manuscript on stage. Here's why: because I'm a firm believer. I do not like reading from my notes. Could you
Yeah.
imagine if I tell you, you need to repent from your sin, and I'm looking
Yeah.
down at my
Yeah.
notes, it just doesn't hit as hard when you're
Yeah.
passionate and you're letting the text drive and you're just allowing the Holy Spirit to convict. I think eye to eye is best in those
Hmm.
situations. That's when you get the pastor. So, uh, so I'm a firm believer in that. So if I have a manuscript going on stage, I'll tell you what, I will speak aloud my manuscript 2 to 3 times. I'll learn my transitions, memorize them.
Hmm.
There's some phrases that I've typed out that don't sound as good out loud, so I'll make
Yeah.
edits. I'll have markups when I go up there, and that's kind of how I do it. So yeah, I preach DNOWs and camps full manuscript on stage. Uh,
That's cool.
so, I would say uh, uh, somewhat it is kind of my comfort zone, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and other times I don't need it because if I'm teaching a story, I just need an outline really. So it
Yeah.
just depends, man.
I got you. I just know when I first started, like I needed kind of a manuscript, and then what I found is for me, I tend to read it because I have the manuscript because I don't want to mess up. So I had to shift personally. So I start with a manuscript, end up with more of a bullet point format, so that I'm kind of like, all right, I know what this bullet point says. I've memorized it. I've done what you said. I've read through it 2 or 3 times, so I got it. But I just know if I
Mm,
have a bunch of notes with me, I'm gonna just tend to go back to them. So like I'm like it's probably bad at first when I started doing it. I was like, I'm just gonna leave myself out to dry. I hope I got it. We'll see. But
that's good.
but anyway, yeah. So that's cool to that there's so many different ways people do it. So please don't feel like you have to do it like one guy. Find what works for you, and the Lord can use you.
Come on.
So second question I have, and this is something that in my context, I have one school. I serve Halton Middle School. So like so for me, it's super easy. And so I know you've probably been in a context where you have 50 schools that you have to try to reach out to. You have just an unlimited number of schools. So what strategy have you seen successful, or do you use as you try to reach out to schools in your student ministry context?
Yeah, so I would say this. Our context right now, I've got one, two, three, including the middle schools, four. I got five primary schools.
Okay,
I'll be
sounds good.
honest with you. I can't do five just by myself. I
Yeah.
do get to lead a team, in which they can hit some as well. But I try to find for me three open doors that I can
Hmm.
consistently go to. So here's my strategy. Like, I'll be honest with you, it's CP every day. And what I mean
Hmm.
by this is CP will change the game for your ministry. CP will provide the growth that you need. CP will allow major things to happen, salvations, relationships, discipleship. It's all about CP. And what I mean by that is this consistent presence. If
Hmm.
you find the three schools you can give a consistent presence to, I don't know for you if it's an FCA you can consistently go to every week.
Yeah.
You may be able to go to the lunchroom consistently every week. You may have the opportunity to be a chaplain of a football school in
Hmm.
which you can consistently pastor and minister to that football team. Whatever it is, if you find three places you can practice CP, it will change the game for anybody.
Yeah.
So for
I agree.
us, in my context, right now, one school, it's a lunchroom. The other school, it is a football team. And the last school, it's a FCA. So
Okay.
that's where I'm at right now. And can I tell you this? We are seeing first time guests that have never stood in a church come to our church on a Wednesday night because of the consistent presence. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh my gosh, you're here!" My wife and I were walking in the neighborhood the other day, and just walking down the street. My wife commented, "These girls were outside practicing cheerleading." She's like, "Y'all are doing a great job." And then they looked at me and they yelled at me because they knew me from being on campus every week.
Yeah.
And that led to a conversation not only about church, but hey, are you going to a camp this summer? Like, it's just
Yeah.
because I consistently went, they now know me. Man, when you build a relationship, you get a connection too. And that connection will be an open door invite for them to come to your church. Here's the reality. Students are coming. Most students are coming to your church twice a week. Why
Mm.
not go
Yeah.
once to them?
Yeah, that's good.
That's their battleground, right? And that's their full time job. We need to go visit them. And I know the reality is that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a discipline to get up and
Hmm.
leave the office to go do it. But I got to encourage the youth pastor that's thinking that way, that ministry happens best away from the desk
Yeah, that's good.
every day of the week. Every day of the week. So I would encourage the youth pastor, man, that's not on campus, that's not in the school. That can't be an excuse. We have to find the peacemaker on campus. That surely there's somebody in your church that's working in your school next to you that you can find a connection who's doing FCA. Give me the phone number of the head coach. Let me bless y'all with Gatorade drop or a popsicle drop.
Yeah.
Bring donuts to the front office. They're the gatekeepers, right? Write them a little
Yeah.
note. Hey, we're here for you. Let me ask you a question for the youth pastor listening. If your church didn't exist where it's at, would your school even notice? So,
Mm.
so you need to make an active presence on your school campus. That way, when the tragedy happens, they know who to call.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that's
Absolutely.
my strategy, man. Find 3 CP.
Yeah, and I'll just echo that consistency because I only have one. It's super easy to be consistent there. But what I've seen, because I'm consistent there, when a student does make their way onto our campus for a fifth quarter or whatever event that they just showed up for, they're like, "Oh, that's Coach Blake. I know Coach Blake." Whatever. However they know me, and that student I have seen is far more engaged when I'm giving the gospel rather than I'm just some random adult that they've never known, because they may never
Mm,
step foot back on our campus. But they've stepped foot on there. They're like, "Oh, I know Coach Blake. That's cool." And then they listen in, they lean in even more. And so that consistency is true about, you may not be seeing great impact on the actual school ground. People might not be coming to Jesus. That's cool. That's okay. You're building seed or dropping seeds for when they do
come
make it to
on.
your campus, to be able to have that opportunity to share the gospel with them. And so I
Yep.
echo that consistency 100%. Um, okay, well, let's transition to the next one. How do you communicate with parents in your ministry? And then how do you organize trainings for them? I know today some people may think if I just put it on Facebook, everybody's going to know about it. That's not necessarily true. So, like, what have you found works well for you to communicate? And then how do you equip your parents, Deuteronomy 6, to lead
Man,
their students?
I will tell you this, man. It's not a one size fits all for a parent. In
That's true.
fact, if one parent hears it this way, another parent has to hear it this way, right? So
Yeah.
I try to be as fluid and flexible as possible with the communication strategy that we have. I think the biggest thing for us is that we're consistent in it, man. You got to be
Yeah.
persistent in these busy parents, and
Hmm.
you can't communicate one time and expect them to know it. In fact, when you feel like they're just so aggravated and so fed up with you saying the same thing after the same thing. That's when they actually finally start to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I know you know that, Blake, and I just think for us, it's a few different methods. Yeah, we just created a Facebook page because they're always on Facebook. So I'm posting
Hmm.
graphics and celebratory, posts, videos, all that stuff, trying to keep up with that. Secondly, email. So
Hmm.
data proves if a parent has to scroll more than twice, they won't even read the email. So what I've been finding very helpful in that I get responses to it is that I'll send out a big three and
Okay.
I will subject title it different things that will provide some clickbait. Hey,
Okay.
final call for every student. Hey, 3 things every parent needs to know, like
Yeah.
clickbait stuff. And then those 3 things will either be an event registration announcement,
Hmm.
parent resources, or anything that's just prevalent for a parent to need to know in our ministry. So my emails are short, simple, succinct, and I send those out. And even at the bottom, hey, if there's anything you need to know or
Hmm.
any other questions, please, respond, and I'll provide links in there they can click, yada yada, but they're short, man. That's a big strategy for us as parent email because
Okay.
everybody's checking their email. And then
Yep.
lastly, we are big on text. So
Yep.
we have a mass text system we use called Glue. And
Okay.
man, I want to encourage you. Everybody's reading their text, so send out mass texts that you can use in your ministry that are maybe just promoting registration. But if it's the week of the event, it's
Hmm.
getting out vital information that
Yeah.
they need to know. And don't make them too long, but include links that need to be in there, include dates, times, reminders. It's crazy that we live in a culture that you have to remind people to go to church, but
Yeah.
that's the reality. And texts are a great way to just communicate in your ministry as well. We don't do anything really print,
Okay.
except our church provides a print handout of the calendar for the semester. Just
Okay.
really simple on a printer, 8 by 11, half sheet, boom. Just give everybody that. And then we communicate, man. If you're not communicating with your environment,
Hmm.
TVs on the wall, having slideshows
Yeah.
of different events coming up, communication in the worship center with slides and QR codes. I have a privilege of doing ministry time often where I get to share some and vision cast some items in our next
Okay.
generation ministry and our adult ministry, in which we're communicating on stage in front of them. Hey, every mom in the room, get your phone out because you need to scan right. So you're always communicating. The
Hmm.
question you might need to ask in your ministry is how often do you need to communicate and are you doing it? So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter the car you drive, you just need to be driving it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I haven't heard of glue before. What is glue?
So Glue is something new to me. I used to use
Hmm.
Ministry by Text, but
Okay.
Glue is just a mass text system in which you can have a report of numbers you can submit to be the audience. And then you can send this text out and click send, and it sends it to the 300 or even a
Okay.
thousand people that have subscribed to the text. So that's all it is. It's just a mass
Does,
text system.
does it cost? I'm assuming.
Oh, it does, yeah. So it's Gloo Glue.
Okay. Yeah. We still use Remind. I don't know if like it's big mainly for schools, but like our it works well in our community. But I would like to shift something else, so I'm gonna check that out. So that's great.
Yeah, yeah. I would
Uh,
I would shift, bro. I used to use Remind a long
yeah.
time ago, and this is man miles better, bro.
Okay. Well, there we go. I learned something today. That's awesome. So let's transition to the next question. How did you make sure to connect with students in your ministry and not let them fall through the cracks? I know we talked about that a little bit in our conversation a few months ago. You had some great things. So how do you make sure to connect with students that come into your door and then also make sure to follow up with them?
Yeah, that's so good, man. And let me just start by saying this. We believe that every first time attender that steps through our doors, they're considered VIP, royalty,
Mm-hmm.
celebrities. And here's why, because we don't know the backstory of these students. These students may be struggling with church hurt, they may have misconceptions about the church. Who knows? They may be fearful and scared to death of being at that church, and we don't even know why they're there. So we try to treat every guest that steps through our building with the respect and honor that they deserve. So here's
Mm-hmm.
some ways that we do that, man. When everybody walks in, we have a designated door everybody comes through so that we're not missing anybody. So when everybody walks in, the first time attender will see a first time guest booth. And
Okay.
then we have student leaders that are on our student leadership team that are back there volunteering, smile on their face, ready to connect, introducing themselves and getting to know this person. While at the same time, their role is to get this first time guest to fill out a form. And why that's so important, man, is because we want to make sure we're doing the best we can in our follow up. I believe
Okay.
one of the most important things you can do in youth ministry is following up with students. So we have
Yeah.
a
Absolutely.
24-hour rule. We won't go 24 hours without them hearing from us. So we do a group text of a couple of staff members. Then we'll introduce ourselves to this guest, celebrating that they were here, asking them if they have any questions, just simple follow up, man. And that
Hmm.
way they can have our number if 3 months from now they go through some sudden tragic event. They got a pastor's number too. So
Yeah.
we had that. But here's how I believe we're keeping them. You see, I don't think most youth pastors strategize about the retention rate. We're all about
Hmm.
getting first time guests there, but I think
Yeah.
we need to focus on how to keep first time guests there. So when they
Yeah.
walk in, not only will they see a first time guest booth, they're also going to see a second time visitor station. And
Oh,
here's
wow.
what's cool about that, man. It's a high top table with a pair of Nike Air Max on top. Uh, and it signifies, first off, wow, they're actually thinking and expecting that I need to come back here. But
Hmm.
number two, I don't know about you, but who wouldn't want to win a free pair of shoes, dude? So it's a great opportunity for them to know I got to come back so I can enter the drawing to win this. And
Yeah.
man, I tell you what, we had a month last semester where we had 71 first time guests. But
That's so cool.
here's the beautiful thing. Over half of them came back.
Yeah.
So man, I just think if you have an experience in which they open their car door, they feel
Mm.
seen, loved, heard, cared for, like all the things. And they
Hmm.
come in and you were ready for them to come,
Yeah.
bro. I think that changes the game, dude. So, man,
Absolutely.
that's why I think about that, and that's our strategy, bro.
And I love that. That's what I remember from what we talked a few months ago. That intentionality of I'm thinking about not just to get you here, but what can I do to get you to here to me consistently. And so we have a connection class for our church, not student ministry, but just for our guests. And so if somebody's doing connection class, we want them to come 3 weeks in a row, and we do it during the primary Sunday school hour for our church. So if they can become consistent in the three, for 3 Sundays in a row, they're more likely to continue. And it sounds like something you're building within student ministry, which is really, really cool. Just if you can make them be consistent, come more than once, they're more than likely to want to try to keep coming. So now that's awesome. Um, we'll transition to the final one, and I'm really interested to hear your answer on this one. But you've been at different size contexts. I know Mississippi and Dallas, and then now even in Oklahoma. How would you say, as you review your year, that you would define, hey, this was successful? And I know numbers are easily kind of like, okay, well, numbers are big, they're important. Each number is a person. But how else do you determine, hey, this year was successful for our student ministry?
Yeah, I am a firm believer, man. The measuring stick for youth ministry has to be life change.
Yeah.
Has to be salvations, baptism, celebrating life change, and I think one of the biggest ways too in this umbrella of seeing people impacted by the gospel is ultimately when teenagers are leading teenagers to Christ.
Hmm.
Man, when you're seeing those three things take part, bro, that's a whole lot of mansions being built in heaven,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And man, I don't know about you, but I want to make a dent on the face of this earth, and that this next generation isn't our generation, by the way. That these young students are passionate, on fire for Jesus, and they're heralding the gospel and being an ambassador for that, so that they can see their spheres, their circles, their friendships change by the blood of
Hmm.
Christ, dude. I mean, it's that simple. So when I look at my year, I'm examining it in a way and asking myself, man, how many lives did God change?
Yeah.
More than the number on Sunday morning or Wednesday night, more than the people and volunteers we had at that event, you know, more than the fun we had at like, dude, how much and how many lives did God impact?
Hmm.
When we get that as a foundation, I think Jesus can do some really cool things, bro.
Absolutely. Because as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, like anybody can draw a crowd. on a Wednesday night or whatever, we're giving away 50 whatever. So come on out. You can draw a crowd, but people making the step to make a decision to follow Jesus, making the extra step in obedience to, hey, I'm going to be baptized, that's big. And so, yeah, that's great.
Heck yeah.
Anthony, I do want to say thank you so much for coming on here. You laid out some really cool. We've hit a wide range of student ministry things, and you really helped lay out some practical things that people can take to their context. So thank you again for giving us some time today.
Dude, Blake, you are a stud, dude. I appreciate you, appreciate your friendship. Thank you for all that you do for the youth ministry community. Man, people and youth pastors, they are being encouraged and equipped because of your leadership. So, on behalf of the church, bro, thank you, bro. Seriously, you're doing a great job, and thanks for the invite. I'm privileged to be on here, and man, I'm willing to connect with any other youth pastor that just wants to further the conversation or just needs just encouragement. You can find all my stuff at anthonyvargas.org. Love to hit you up with a phone call, just like you, Blake. I mean, it was just a phone call that we got to chat it out, and man, now we got a great friendship. So appreciate you, bro.
Well, and I'm sure you had people reach out to you when you were young and when you were first in ministry, and they helped disciple you. And that same thing for me. And so we both have that heart, man. If you have questions or you just, man, hey, this is something I never thought through, reach out to somebody. Don't try to do it on your own. Ministry is not made to be on our own. We need to do it as a community and help each other reach these students to follow Jesus.
Come on, that'll preach, bro.
Well, as we end, if this is your first time listening to the episode, we have so many guys like Anthony that have been able to come on and give us their wisdom. And so please go back and watch some of the episodes so you can learn from them as well. We're on Spotify,